Good morning, world. Welcome to my podcast, Chats with Baba. Baba is a term used to recognize eldership, and I guess at this point in my life, I've reached the point of being an elder. The purpose of the podcast is to inform and empower parents of young Black children. We recognize that parents are the first and foremost teachers to the lives of children. To inform parents is to enable them to release the natural genius in Black children. Black children have untapped and underdeveloped gifts. The quality of experience and exposure lays the foundation for life. We want to move from miseducation to education. Our goal is to strive for excellence. One or two of the things that I've pointed out in the past, parents, as you're working with children, not that you sit them down and do this, but you want to teach them to listen, pay attention, follow directions, start and finish a task. By doing so, that will enable them to respond basically to what's expected of them in the classroom. Today is going to be a little different. We have a guest. We have Yvette Manns, who is one of my former students, who is doing extremely well in terms of her writing for children's literature and other things. So without further delay, I'm going to turn today's podcast over to Yvette Manns, and it's going to be her presentation. And at the end, I will come back and close it out as I've always done in the past. So without further ado, I introducing you to Yvette Manns. Yvette?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, listeners, parents, and the community and the village that it takes to raise our Black children. I'm so excited to be here with you all today, and it is truly a privilege to be in this space with you all as we discuss bringing out the inherent genius that exists in all of our Black children. Dr. Young, as always, it's an honor to be here, and I know you mentioned some accolades and things that I've achieved, but I would be remiss if I did not thank you for pouring into me as a young 17, 18-year-old trying to figure out how I would make my way in this world. So thank you for enlightening me on my passion and my path to literacy. Today, I want to talk to parents and listeners about ways to develop our children's reading brains and inherent abilities that exist within us. Just a little bit of background, my 9 to 5 is housed in a literacy research center. And there I work with government officials, teachers, parents, and other stakeholders on how to develop children's reading brains. You might ask yourself, what is a reading brain? A reading brain is a brain that has been primed for language and literacy opportunities. So the same way we have food nutrition and healthy choices, we have something that's called language nutrition as well. And I'm sure that everyone knows it starts early. It starts in utero. Singing and talking and letting your baby hear your voice helps to develop a skill called phonemic awareness. And phonemic awareness is being able to hear the different sounds in words. You might ask, why is that important? Well, it helps your child to be able to differentiate the different sound and speech parts. So when they go to read or learn their letter sounds, they can associate breaking up sounds of letters and sounds of words with the speech and language that has been modeled for them. Also, I work closely with a lot of elementary schools in the Atlanta metropolitan area. So I consult and contract with them on how to create what we call the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is a holistic environment with all the living and non-living things, the systems and procedures and ways that we help to develop and nurture and grow our children within a school. So it could be as small as how you greet the children every morning, making sure they're seen and acknowledged and heard and spoken to by their name or preferred name, as far as choosing curriculum and meaningful assessments that don't overtest kids, but gives us the data to guide instruction to do what's best for children. That's one part of my job. The second part of my job is as a content developer. So I work to create courses on an online platform that gives professional development to teachers, principals, and government officials. So that's really interesting because I get to write scripts that are about 75 to 100 pages long. And then we get to go into a film studio with a production crew, film those videos, and we share it for free with educators and parents just like you. That's the day job. In the night and evenings and weekends and any other free time, I spend my time sharing the message of the importance of representation in children's literature. And I'm going to ask you a question that someone asked me last week, and just I want you to think about it and just ponder. When was the first time you saw a book and you saw an image of yourself reflected back to you? Unfortunately, for many African American children or adults, we don't see a lot of ourselves in literature. There are more books about animals and mythological creatures than there are about Black characters. And what I noticed a lot as I became a teacher was that I had children who didn't read. And I was so baffled because I said, well, I know I'm teaching them explicit, systematic literacy instruction. They know how to decode the words. They know how to read and recognize, but they did not pick up books. And when I was talking to the other teachers on my team, we realized it wasn't that they did not have the ability to read. They did not have the inspiration to read. If you're constantly being fed material and you have to be immersed in somebody else's story, but never have the opportunity to see images of yourself, there's but so much of that that you can take, unfortunately. And so when we started to tap into our children's interests and show and exhibit literature that reflected characters that looked like them, we saw a huge spike in engagement in literacy. And that in turn improved a lot of comprehension skills and just overall interest in reading. There's a popular quote by Rudine Sims Bishop that talks about mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And she categorizes children's literature into different categories. So when you have books that are mirrors of yourself, this type of literature becomes affirming, and a lot of readers seek the mirrors in their book. When you have books that are windows, it allows you to look outside from your perspective into somebody else's world, which we see mostly represented in children's literature. And then you have sliding glass doors, which take an authentic take into allowing you to step into the shoes of another one. And all of those different types of books have their purposes. For instance, books that are sliding glass doors help to build empathy in children by allowing them to be in the shoes of another individual. But the reflection of ourselves are so important, and it's not just limited to children. If we really want to talk about how media chooses to portray Black and African American individuals on mainstream, it's a disservice to our people. I think that a lot of the mainstream information that's disseminated creates this narrative of Black people that we are somebody who can be contained as a group. And we know that Black people are not a monolith. We know that there's not just one type of person, one type of learner, or one set of interests that define ourselves. So this inspired me to create authentic experiences in children's literature. And when I say authentic, I'm not talking about racially ambiguous brown characters who anybody and everybody can pick up and say, oh, well, I guess, yeah, he's kind of tan. Maybe he can be Black. Maybe he can be Latinx. Maybe he can be another ethnicity with a tan. I'm talking about Black children with Black names and who use African American vernacular English and not so quote unquote standardized English. I want us to capture our experiences and immortalize them within the pages of a book in order to say, okay, this is like me, or this is how I interact with my parents, or these are other adults and individuals who impact my life, just like this character is displaying in this book. So my first book that I wrote was called HBCU Proud, and it's about the legacy of historically Black colleges and universities. And so this story is a realistic fiction story about a young man who travels down south and finds himself on the campus of Legacy University. Legacy University is inspired by the illustrious Clark Atlanta University. And if you take a look at the back cover and the illustrations, my illustrator did a really great job capturing the essence of CAU down to the statues and the buildings and the large grass area. And in this story, I wanted to feature the protagonist as a young man who is able to make decisions on his own and come to conclusions on their own. In doing research, I found that in children's literature, kids don't want to always have the moral of the story to be warm and fuzzy, or an adult tells them how to figure things out. If you think about when your children are trying to tie their shoes, after a while, they're like, no, I can do it. Let me do it. And I think showing that autonomy and that choice and that boldness in authentic Black children's literature is important. So if you read the story, he learns a little bit about the traditions of historically Black colleges, but he comes to his own conclusion about whether he's going to attend and how he's going to stand up for what's right in that moment. And I inspire and want to encourage you to do the same with your children. Give your children the autonomy of choice. When, for instance, I remember a couple weeks ago, I went to an ice cream shop in my neighborhood, and there was a young Black mother and a young Black father with maybe about a child that was about 5 years old. And they asked him what ice cream would he like, and he just pointed. And they prompted him, use your words. And he said, oh, I would like the chocolate one. And I was just so excited to hear the expression in his voice and the complete sentences. And then the parents took it a little further. They engaged him. Well, why would you like this flavor? You've never tried this before. And there was a back and forth discourse between the parents and the children. And that was so inspiring, because unfortunately in our culture, I see sometimes children don't have choice, or their voice is not as amplified, or they may be told, oh, well, stay in a child's place. Don't ask questions, or don't. It's not really that back and forth engagement. But what I'm seeing now, as I talk to parents and stakeholders and educators, and I'm sure listeners like you, we are empowering the voices of our children. And that, again, helps with literacy development. Literacy, reading and writing are inverse operations of speaking and writing as well. Like, they work in tandem. So by giving our children opportunities to exercise their sense of choice and voice, that really empowers them to be the leaders that we know they already are inside. And I want to go back and talk a little bit about staying in a child's place, so to speak. I remember when I first started to teach, I struggled a lot with children asking me questions. And that was from my own experience. And then I realized these children are trying to clarify, or they're just being naturally inquisitive. And that goes back to the Black genius that's within each and every one of our children. And I came to a consensus. I said, okay, you can clarify and inquire. If you're trying to challenge me, we're going to go head to head. And as we did, it allowed me to open up more too, because I said, you know what? Yeah, challenge me. What's your perspective? Why do you think differently? Why don't you agree with this? And it opened up so much more dialogue, and my children became so much more confident, and I loved it. I want our children to be bold and as outspoken, if not more, than their counterparts that they see. So the example in the ice cream shop is just one way that you can engage your children at home. There are different activities that you can do. And one thing that I really, really advocate for is to allow your children to catch you reading, whether it's an ebook or whether it's a hard book. Technology is changing, and there's various modalities of literature that's available. A lot of parents say, well, how do I get my kid to read? They're not really interested in literature. Well, you can't be what you don't see. And so if they see mom and dad reading the newspaper or just engaging in text, they'll be more likely to do the same thing as well. As far as for educators who are working with children, although I focus in the kindergarten through third grade space, I think that we as a culture, we have a unique model of teaching and working with each other, meaning that our schooling does not just stop at a formal education. There's so many learning opportunities as we sit with elders, like Dr. Young mentioned earlier, and we sit with our counterparts and our peers. We can learn and absorb and gather that information to become parts of ourselves. So as you're working with your children and other children as educators, as parents, or even as family members who don't necessarily have children, I would encourage you to make sure that you inspire your children and just listen to what they're interested in. Listen to what naturally sparks joy and gives them that look in their eye that makes them want to learn more information. There's a lot of talk nowadays about the science of literacy. And basically, the science of literacy and the science of reading, it talks about the components of a reading brain. So, like we talked about phonological awareness or phonemic awareness as a precursor or a foundation to learning how to read, there are other skills that come. So, once children can hear the different sounds in words, so you could be singing nursery rhymes or playing word games with your child at home, and they enter into preschool, then they're able to build upon that and eventually assign those letters to sounds, those sounds to letters. They're eventually able to decode words, read predictable text, infer, build their comprehension, expand their vocabulary. And I think that's really important that we look at that as a Black community, because there's a reason why the research follows a continuum. There are skills that build upon each other. So that's not to say that one is more important than the other. Of course, letter recognition and sound recognition is important too, but there's also an importance of self-recognition too. So I think that the science of reading is great. It is really great. It shows how skills compound upon each other, and they help to get our children to be reading and avid readers who comprehend. But we also have to have the culturally responsive piece to where we see ourselves and where we engage with text. So as an educator or as a parent, I would like to encourage you to have your children be critical thinkers. Don't accept everything that you read as truth. We all know when we read articles on the internet or we hear things in the news, there's different perspectives that can skew the authenticity of the message. And so when you teach your children how to be critical thinkers, they're able to develop something called metacognition, and they're thinking about what they're thinking as they're thinking it. And so that allows them to analyze and question and challenge and create their own opinions. So that will be something that's very important to take away. And of course, we have the science of literacy, the science of reading, the science of teaching, but we know there's an art to teaching. You have to know your children. There's a skill, a certain finesse, and making sure that your message gets across to your children in a way that responds to them. There's no one size fits all in education, as we all know. And as adults, we navigate trying to fit into spaces where the structure may be formulated for us, but it doesn't respond to us. So by inspiring our children at a young age in order to develop their own interests and skills, then they'll be more likely to choose spaces that respond and resonate with them a little bit more.
Today, we've had as our guest, Miss Yvette Manns. Tell them where you can purchase your book.
Okay, great. So my book, HBCU Proud, is available on Amazon.com. And I have 2 more books coming out this summer. One is a book about social emotional learning and feelings of children. And it explores how children may demonstrate certain feelings, but what that looks like when they don't have the words for it. So that book is co-authored by myself and an alum of Morehouse College. He's a therapist back in Philadelphia, and we co-authored that book. And then I have another book coming out. I'll tell you all, breaking here first. It's called Cityrella. So it's Cinderella, but in New York City. So it's like a hip-hoppy kind of like remix version. It's really great. And we've been fortunate to have Black illustrators, and we just really want to make sure that the representation is there. So I know a lot of children love princess stories, but this princess story is one for all the people who grew up in big cities like I did. So those books will be available on Amazon as well. And I am available for Zoom read alouds for groups and classrooms starting again in the fall.
Well, thank you. I will include Yvette's, Miss Manns' information in my next newsletter. All of what she said has been captured in my monthly newsletter. If you go back and read the second newsletter, the last sentence in the newsletter reads as follows: children first learn to read and then read to learn. So what you want is to have your children to develop an appreciation for reading, appreciation for learning, and the rest takes care of itself. Yvette, thank you very much. And all of you enjoy the Memorial Day weekend and be safe. Thank you. Signing off.